A man scores 3 goals in a World Cup final. The first person to do that in 56 years, and he loses. He does it with his team dead on its feet, 2 goals down, silent, being humiliated in front of the planet. And he drags them back to life not once, but twice. He is, by common agreement, the best player on the pitch in the biggest match on Earth, and he still loses. He ends the night alone, the golden boot in his hand and nothing else in it. Watching a man he had worshipped as a boy lift the only trophy that ever truly mattered to him. So here's the question this whole story is going to answer. How do you do the impossible and still go home with nothing? It starts on a cracked concrete pitch in a rough suburb of Paris with a poster pinned to a boy's bedroom wall. Lusail, Qatar, the 18th of December, 2022. Bondy, a working-class suburb on the northeastern edge of Paris. The kind of place the cameras usually only visit when something has gone wrong. It is here in the late 1990s that the boy is born into a family soaked in sport. A father who coaches at the local club, a mother who had been a professional handball player. From almost the moment he can walk, he is at the local pitch. A modest municipal ground with a running track around it where his father runs the sessions. And the son is the smallest, fastest, most infuriatingly confident kid on the grass. On his bedroom wall, he pins a poster of a Portuguese forward in white. The most relentless goal scorer in the world, and tells anyone who will listen that he is going to be like him. The adults smile the way adults do, but this boy is different. And everyone who sees him play knows it early. He is faster than children years older. He is fearless in a way that cannot be taught, running straight at grown defenders as though they are cones. At France's famous National Academy, the finishing school for the country's best young talent. The coaches file him under a word they use rarely, generational. By 15 and 16, the biggest clubs in Europe are already circling a schoolboy from Bondy. He has done nothing yet, and yet the sense around him is not if, it is how soon and how high. He does not so much arrive as detonate, at 17 breaking into the first team of a club in the south of France. He plays a single season so electric that it barely seems real. Tearing through the best defenses in Europe at a speed the game had almost forgotten was possible. Helping his unfashionable club win the French league and reach the last 4 of the Champions League. Overnight, a teenager nobody outside France had heard of is the most talked about young player on the planet. And the comparisons that come are not modest ones. They reach for the biggest name in the sport's history. The only teenager ever to truly dominate a World Cup, and they say, this boy might be next. The richest club in France moves for him, and the fee they eventually pay makes him the most expensive teenager the sport has ever bought. A price tag that would crush most young shoulders. It does not crush his. In the navy blue of Paris, wearing a famous number, he keeps scoring. Keeps sprinting, keeps winning league titles, his acceleration so violent that defenders seem to be running in sand beside him. He is not yet 20, and already he is being spoken of not as a prospect, but as an heir. The young man being lined up to inherit a throne that 2 aging kings, a magician and the forward from his bedroom wall, had held between them for 15 years. He would not have to wait his turn. The takeover began that very summer, at a World Cup no one expected him to steal. And then at 19, the coronation, sooner and more total than anyone had dared predict. A World Cup in Russia, and a French team stacked with talent, but waiting for someone to seize it. He seizes it in the round of 16 against Argentina, against the old magician himself. He produces a moment that announces him to the entire planet, winning a penalty by sprinting 90 meters in about 10 seconds. A blur of a boy outrunning the ball itself. And then scoring twice to knock the 2-time champions out. The world sits up. A teenager is taking a World Cup by the throat. He does not stop. He drives France through the knockouts. And in the final against Croatia, he steps up and strikes a low shot from distance into the corner. And in doing so becomes the first teenager since the greatest of them all, 60 years earlier, to score in a World Cup final. France are champions of the world. He is 19 years old, a boy from Bondy with a winner's medal and the whole of football at his feet. It looked, that summer, less like a beginning than a takeover, as though the succession had already happened. And the only question left was how many of these he would win. Nobody watching him lift that trophy could have imagined that his most staggering World Cup performance was still 4 years away, and that it would end in tears. But a crown that comes that early is also a weight, and the years after Russia taught him how heavy. He was no longer a surprise, he was an expectation. Every match was measured against the boy who had won the world at 19. He carried his club and his country as the designated savior. And the sport, which loves to build young kings, began as it always does to test them. The lowest point came at a European championship. France, the reigning world champions, favorites, ran into Switzerland in the knockouts, and it went to a penalty shootout. He stepped up to take what could have been the decisive kick and missed. France were out. And the abuse that fell on a 22-year-old afterwards, some of it ugly and racist, was a brutal lesson in what the throne costs. He absorbed it the way the very best do, by getting better. But the doubt had a shape now, familiar from the two kings before him. Dazzling on the club stage, a champion already, and yet still, at the very biggest international moments, capable of falling agonizingly short. The difference was time. He was still absurdly young. And the next World Cup was coming, in the desert, where the old magician he had knocked out 4 years earlier would be waiting for one last dance. And where the young heir would get the chance to take the crown for himself once and for all. It would become the greatest final ever played, and it would break his heart. The final in the desert is where this story earns its title. For 80 minutes, it is not his night at all. Argentina, driven by the old magician, lead 2-0. And France are so poor, so lifeless, that he can barely get a kick. A champion silenced, a coronation curdling into humiliation on the biggest stage of all. And then 90 seconds that rewrote the history of the game. A penalty, won and hammered high into the net. Moments later, a loose ball drops, he swings on the turn, and a volley screams in. 2 goals, a blink, 2-2. A dead French team suddenly, impossibly alive. The match explodes into the most dramatic final ever played. Into extra time, the old magician scores again, 3-2, Argentina. And once more the young man answers, another penalty, struck without a flicker of fear. 3-3, a hat trick. The first man to score 3 goals in a World Cup final in 56 years. He has done everything a human being can do. He has scored 3 times in a World Cup final and refused twice to let his team die. And it is not enough. Because football, at the very end, offers no mercy, it goes to a penalty shootout. And there, one by one, the shootout turns against France and Argentina win. He converts his own penalty, calm as ever. It does not matter. He collects the golden boot as the tournament's leading scorer. And it feels less like a prize than a receipt for everything it did not buy. He stands amid the Argentine celebrations, dry-eyed and hollow, 23 years old, having produced the greatest losing performance the sport has ever witnessed. A magician got his fairy tale that night. The heir got a lesson, that you can be the best player on the pitch in the biggest game on earth and still go home with nothing. Here is what separates this heartbreak from the 2 that came before it, and it is the most important sentence in the whole story. He is not finished. When the old magician finally won his World Cup, it was the end of an 18-year climb, a summit reached in the last light of a great career. When the forward from his bedroom wall wept in a tunnel, it was a door closing for good. But the boy from Bondy walked out of the greatest final ever played at 23. Younger at that moment than either of his idols had been when they won their first international trophy. The hat trick that lost a final was not the end of his story. It may not even be the middle. He has already done what almost no one does, won the World Cup as a teenager and then lost one while being its best player. He has since put on the famous all-white of the biggest club in the world, chasing the one prize, the Champions League, that would complete him at club level too. The kings he grew up idolizing have left the stage. The crown they held between them for a decade and a half is, for now, unclaimed. And the young man who scored 3 goals in a final and still lost has more chances to seize it than anyone alive. The greatest final anyone ever lost might one day look like the night his real story began. That is the story so far, and it is worth telling properly. If it moved you, subscribe to Field and Tail, the great stories of football, and we'll tell you the next one.